A significant milestone has been reached in the District of Columbia's medical cannabis program with the opening of the first licensed testing laboratory. Clearsight Labs, the inaugural recipient of a medical cannabis testing laboratory license, has begun operations, marking the official implementation of the district's testing requirements. As per the Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Administration, ABCA, cultivation centers and manufacturers are now obligated to have their medical cannabis and products tested by a licensed laboratory before they can be transferred for sale. This ensures the quality and safety of the products available to registered medical cannabis patients. Patients also have the option of having their purchased products tested by the laboratory to verify their quality and potency. This added layer of consumer protection empowers patients to make informed decisions about their medical cannabis treatment. The licensing of the testing laboratory also strengthens the district's enforcement efforts against unlicensed cannabis operations. The Alcoholic Beverage and Cannabis Board now has the authority to summarily close and padlock establishments that distribute untested cannabis products, seizing any illicit materials found on the premises. This development marks a crucial step in establishing a regulated and transparent medical cannabis market in the District of Columbia, ensuring the safety and quality of products available to patients while also addressing concerns related to unlicensed activities, according to ABCA's public notice. The ABC Board also recently adopted emergency regulation for the failure of products that are tested in the lab. On August 28, 2024, the board unanimously voted to adopt emergency and proposed rulemaking procedures, allowing the remediation of certain medical cannabis products that fail initial testing. This action stems from the recently enacted Medical Cannabis Amendment Act of 2022, which transitioned the program from the Department of Health to the board's purview. The new legislation prioritizes patient safety and industry growth. The board emphasizes the importance of ensuring patients have access to medical cannabis free from harmful impurities, pesticides, and other contaminants. Therefore, appropriate testing remains a cornerstone of the program. However, the new rules acknowledge the situations where failed tests might not necessitate product destruction. Examples include test spoilage due to improper transport or errors during laboratory analysis. The emergency rules establish a framework for remediating specific product types. Notably, remediation is not permitted for products failing pesticide tests due to the absence of safe and effective remediation methods for such contaminants. The board allows remediation for medical cannabis oils and botanical cannabis, as these products can be refined to address certain impurity concerns. Remediated products must undergo retesting to ensure they meet all quality and safety standards before reaching patients. The board seeks public feedback on the proposed rule. All interested parties can submit written comments within the next 30 days of publication in the DC Register. The comments will be reviewed before potentially finalizing the rules. So I think here we go, one step forward in DC, since they do have regulators, even though they are not a state. And hopefully this will address some of the concerns. I do find it interesting that they are not going to allow remediation for some pesticide failures in flower. The remediation for that in most places is distillation or butane extraction, because that does purify whatever product that you're testing, and reduces it to, yes, you take a large loss on the product, but you end up with distillate, which is saving yourself somehow. The best way to remediate for pesticides is probably just don't use them, but that would mean you have to improve your growing practices, and it's an IPEM, it's an environmental measure as well. So you want to make sure that you're creating the proper growing environment. You won't deal with any pesticide needs. But I'll throw it back to you guys and see what you guys think on the process that DC is making.
Prayers for DC.
This is probably why the first story is, because now these guys are all going to have to pay for testing, and so that's just cutting into even more of their overhead costs, and they just can't afford it.
Wow. Running a business costs money.
I agree with that, Jenny Beth. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but I'm just wondering if that is adding to the to the previous story this morning.
Well, it should make them happy if they have a padlock program in DC. It should make them happier, because that means that the unlicensed retailers who don't have tested products aren't going to be able to provide proper COAs and chain of custody are going to lose their product. The fact that they're also taking products from those unlicensed operators, as opposed to just locking the door for you to come back with your bolt cutters later, is very interesting. So,
because those padlock problems work so well, we've seen how it was so effective in New York.
Well, they worked really well up in Oakland too when they got cut off the trailers a few weeks ago, unfortunately.
Oh, so, man, that's a totally different type of padlock situation.
Man. I'm gonna say one thing. I'm gonna keep it at one thing. That if you allow Washington, D.C. to actually legalized and they won't be forced into a position where they're trying to implement, 64 when they have the 215 market still operating.
It's a big.
Well, there's never been problems with testing labs, right?
Exactly, Dale.
Let's hope they've learned some things from, what happened here in California. Because with one, you can charge wherever you want. You don't have to try and shave your numbers. But once you add a couple more and there's competition, what we've seen is, hey, bring it to me and I'll give you a 30%, THC mark, and there won't be any pesticides. But then when some kid gets it and tests it, like it's got 12% and there's all kinds of shit in there. So I would hope that they would learn. But Jenny, Beth, you and I both know that they have rectal myopia when it comes to looking around the industry and seeing, what didn't work? Well, let's try it again. Well, what part of that is insanity? Do the same thing over again and expecting a different result. I'm just never hopeful with people planning this industry. We've got to reach a happy medium where common sense comes into this somewhere.
And there's only one lab that's operational. Am I correct about that?
Correct.
So it's a monopoly currently.
That was the title of the story for Cannabis Lab.
Monopoly.
Well, I mean, like you see what happened in California. We had all these these labs come in, and then everybody was selling test results. Something like 170 labs opened up in the period of 2 years. Something ridiculous. I'd have to go back and check the numbers again. But there's not that much space in the market, and yes, testing does kind of get backlogged. But if you see what's happening, they didn't even have the measures put into place to effectively, quantify how these labs are testing. They're not all using mass spec or using the same technology. So it's, one is based on weight. I mean, you need to standardize these things and make sure you're rolling out effectively. And I think one lab's a hell of a lot easier to regulate than hundreds.
Yeah, but they still don't have calibration standards. That was the problem I had with these labs, is that how do you set your equipment without a calibration standard that we all agree on, so that we know that the results coming out are accurate? We don't get that. I mean, the DEA labs have that, but these other labs didn't. And so the numbers are just all over the damn place for the same sample. And that's not supposed to be when you're doing science. The same sample should test the same at every lab, and we all know it didn't, and it doesn't.
Right.